Good afternoon, respectable organizing committee for the first virtual forum for thesis projects, dear professors and dear fellow students. My name is Felicitas Hernandez Rosales, and I am going to share my project with you. My project is titled Fostering Language Learning in High School Students Through Literary Analysis. Now, I believe that the study of literature in a second language can aid in the acquisition and perfectioning of the same. And choosing material carefully can also aid in the process or activities that will foster this motivation and interest. Plus, offer cultural growth as different texts will be covered and different topics too. The problem is that teenagers nowadays find reading rather boring because internet is so readily at hand as are other technological devices that capture their interest. So it is a little bit difficult to pull them into reading. Now, the UNESCO says that this is basically cultural when it comes to Mexico, because Mexico occupies the 107th place out of 108 in reading habits, which means that the average Mexican will read about 3 books per year. Fernando Uriarte Zazueta, a Mexican congressman, said that reading is an irreplaceable activity in the development of children, teenagers, and adults who are productive. And Ana Karen Garcia, who is a writer for El Economista newspaper, said that out of 58 out of 100 Mexicans did not read a book basically because they found it boring or they did not have the time to do so, according to them. I have 3 research questions that are: 1, what is considered a literary text? 2, what activities in literature teaching help promote or foster language learning? And 3, what material can be used to improve high school students' levels of English? This takes us to chapter 2 that talks about the theoretical framework. And I am going to refer to Jean Piaget, who was always interested in how the mind works and always stated that knowledge is unmeasurable, saying that it is impossible to get inside a person's brain and to figure out how much it is that they have learned. Rather, he focused on the cognitive learning processes, which is the way that we receive information, we interpret this information, we store it, and then retrieve it or pull it out when it is necessary to use it. This is called input and output. Some of the processes used can be interpreting, organizing, and analyzing, and you can find these in taxonomy such as Bloom's. Then we have constructivism, which refers to the way that people construct their knowledge. Well, it turns out that each person constructs his or her knowledge because of the understanding of the world that surrounds them. Therefore, knowledge is constructed and totally personal. Now, according to the International Baccalaureate Organization, a text can be any visual or auditive material because it all conveys a message. We have literary texts, which are narratives, and they tell us because they tell a story, and they contain elements of fiction such as plot, setting, alliteration, personification, characterization, etc. These can be poetry, autobiographies, short stories, and novels. And then we also have those texts which are non-literary, and these do not contain narratives or fictional elements, but they do offer information. These can be recipes, textbooks, legal documents, articles from academic journals, and instruction manuals. Now, content-based instruction is an approach that I use in my class, and this approach focuses not on the language itself, but rather what is being taught through the language. The target language is learned through other content. It is completely student-centered. Now, researcher Stoller in 2002 listed 8 practices that allow for natural content integration. But I am not going to read one by one. I am going to explain it in a different way. If you assign task-based activities and projects along with valuable input to your students and have your students gather information, process it, and report it, then you will be receiving meaningful output from your students and observing knowledge that has been acquired, and then is displayed through the 4 integrated skills, which are reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Now, through a variety of activities in your class, you will be nurturing the multiple intelligences. Everybody has different intelligences, and it is important that we foster them. Now, this takes us to the second question that says, What activities in literature teaching help promote or foster language learning? Well, I would say debates, speeches, TED Talks, talk shows, broadcasts, storytelling, and literature circles are all activities that students enjoy and that they can learn from. Not only from not only the language itself, but they also develop other skills that are useful for life. Further on in life, they will probably have to participate in debates or speeches. Um, and maybe they will one day want to share something that really interests them. And this is where TED Talks come in. They really enjoy creating their own TED Talks on topics that interest them as long as they are respectful, and then sharing it with their students through a recording. Now, what material can be used to improve high school students' level of English? We are so used to textbooks, but we want to try something new. How about authentic materials such as magazines, newspapers, articles, diaries, journals, anything that is authentic and real for the students? Now, there are different text types, and we also have cartoons, believe it or not. We have movies, debates, interviews, speeches, and videos, and all of these are also text types, okay? Because, like I said before, they convey a message. You can also use their, or the students, I mean, their or their peers' writings. They can do correction, self-correction, peer correction, and they can also go on the internet to look for other kinds of texts that are interesting to them. Now I'm going to talk about the historical context, which is so important for the study of literature. You're probably wondering what I am talking about. Well, historical context is all the information that is based on social, religious, economic, and political conditions that existed during a certain time and place, better known as the setting. Let's say, for example, you're going to study Blood Wedding from Federico Garcia Lorca. Well, I recommend highly that besides looking up Federico Garcia Lorca's autobiography, I would also suggest looking up the place where he was born in, but give it a focus, maybe the gender roles in Granada during the time that Federico Lorca was living. But I would also team it with maybe a timeline of important events that were happening in Mexico during his lifetime, or maybe important happenings around the world during his lifetime. This gives the opportunity for conversation, for the sharing of information plus cultural growth, as I had said before. Now I am going to talk about something else. I'm going to give you examples of why historical context is so important, because it can help a reader understand the narrative and the motives for why it was written. Let's say that, for example, there is a phrase that says, she crossed her fingers behind her back, hoping that everybody would believe her. In modern days, you would say, well, maybe she told a lie or she broke something and she's lying to get out of the problem. But how about if you're talking about 1690 during the Salem witch trials? Here, the information would take on a different toll, because here maybe she is lying to save her life, to avoid being burned at the stake because she has been accused of being a witch. Or maybe you will say, oh, the happy couple got married and they rushed off to California to live. And you would say, oh, how romantic. Maybe they are going to live in San Francisco or one of those beautiful cities. But what if it's 1849 and they got married and they are moving because the husband wants to join the gold rush? Well, a lot of times people would not come back. So you see, this is why historical context is so important for the reading of literature. This takes us to chapter 3, where I talk about the methodology. Now, who did I work with? I had 30 students from a private school in Momoxpan who were ages 17 to 18 in the 11th grade when we started, and obviously close to 19 when we finished in 12th grade. They all started the course with a B1 or B2 level according to the Common European Framework of Reference, and it was expected that they would reach a C1 or a C2 level in 12th grade with 3 hours of literature class per week. My investigation type was a qualitative and a case study, and I used observation journals and recordings as part of my instruments. And the procedure consisted in giving my students 40 lines of a text that they had seen before in one of the classes, but they were supposed to prepare a speech on that text for 20 minutes. Well, their voice was recorded while they were presenting, And in case that they were lagging or in case that they stalled, the teacher would ask a question to keep them talking. The recording was supposed to demonstrate that they had understood the text well and that they were able to interpret the message and to read between the lines. And this was partly shown through their accuracy and the fluency with which they spoke. Hopefully by then at a C1 or a C2 level based on the Common European Framework of Reference. My objectives for this were to make literature both motivating and productive for the students whilst improving their English level, to cover the needs of visual, auditive, and kinesthetic students through activities that would attract them and take everybody into consideration, and to propose activities and material that would be useful for teachers of the subject. Chapter 4 reveals the results, which were the following. Out of the 30 students that sat this exam, one reached a 6 out of 7 points, which is the maximum. Almost nobody gets 7 points. And this means that the student reached a C2 level or was close to it. 17 students reached a 5 in the standard or middle level, which was a C1. And 12 obtained a 4, which was the limit reach of a C1 level. This meant that they just barely made it to the C1 and that they would have to continue to improve the language, but well, they made it just the same. So as I say here, this shows that the level of English did improve from B1 and B2 levels to C1 and C2. Chapter 4. In chapter 4, I make some recommendations and my conclusions. Well, I suggest that the wider the variety and activities that are linked to the reading, the more the students will be motivated to learn and reading is fostered. If you use authentic material that can serve as a motor to develop skills and not just fill in time, well, this can be useful to the students. A lot of teachers just want to fill in hours and they do not take into consideration the students' needs. So this is very important. I suggest to select material that will offer cultural growth and that appeals to your students' taste to keep them interested in your class and to help them grow culturally. And well, use your creativity to encourage theirs too. We are examples for our students, and if we are creative, then they are in a way pushed to be creative themselves. These are my sources, and I want to finish by thanking you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.